Welcome to Meaningful Activities to Generate Interesting Classrooms, Section 4, Part 5, Civil War Simulation. Our next culminating activity is a simulation of Civil War influences using hands-on materials. On page 158, Levels of Student Engagement, you can see that a simulation represents the second highest level of engagement because students are simulating a live event. Simulations are used when a live event is not possible or practical. Please locate page 165, Activity Civil War Simulation. Please go to Canvas, Modules, Section 4, Part 5, Civil War Simulation for the revised activity directions. The next activity focuses on the Civil War that took place in the United States. This culminating activity is a production simulation that demonstrates why the North won the war. This activity is representative of simulations and hands-on activities that you can create to make an event come alive in the classroom. First, we will form North and South teams that are representative of the population at the time. Please find your group members listed on Canvas Modules Section 4, Part 5, Civil War Simulations. As you know, the North and the South both had commands and generals who were integral to the war. Please use the editable Google Docs associated with the North or the South. As a group, brainstorm a list of the Union or Confederate commanders or generals who were important to your side. Please feel free to explore the history.net website provided on the slide. Then choose one person in your group to lead your group and assume the title of one of the individuals on your list. Which Union commanders and generals did you list, and who is your leader? Did you select Ulysses S. Grant, George McClellan, General William Tecumseh Sherman, Winfield Scott Hancock? Which Confederate commanders and generals did you list, and who is your leader? Did you select Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, J.E.B. Stuart, James Longstreet, George Pickett? Next, work as a group and brainstorm a list of items needed to win a war. What items did you list as necessary to win the war? Did you mention guns, ammunition, food, uniforms, soldiers, money, transportation, medical supplies, equipment such as cannons and cannonballs, good leaders, and a strategy? In this simulation, your side is to produce as many war materials as possible, using the supplies you have around your home: scrap paper, scissors, pencils or pens for tracing. Your group will use scrap paper, scissors, and pencils or pens for tracing to produce items for the war. Please remove the Civil War stencil sheet from your course folder. You are to use the items on this sheet as stencils. You will cut out each stencil, trace each item on scrap paper, and cut out as many of each item as you can in the time allotted. The items must be produced or cut neatly in order for them to count as inventory. Before we begin, your group has 3 minutes to discuss and develop a production strategy for your side. Refer to the questions in your Google Doc. You have 10 minutes to produce your items. We will now calculate the total materials you created. Please return to Canvas Module Section 4 Part 5 Civil War Simulation and the Google Doc for your side of the war. Sort the materials you produced into piles of similar items. Post pictures as evidence of the items you produced. Insert the images into your side's Google Doc. Choose someone from your group who will be the quality control person for your side. Count the number of each item you produced and write the number on the corresponding line in the north or south column. The quality control person can reject any that are not cut neatly. All disputes will be brought to headquarters or the instructor. Then calculate the total of the materials you produced. In the discussion area, the North group's leader should post its count for each item. In the discussion area, the South group's leader should post its count for each item. You will notice that the winner is the North. The North won the war. On page 166, please locate the subheading, Why the North Won the War. In our class, why do you think the North won the war? Did they have more people producing items? Did they work faster? Did they have more scissors and pencils? Just like the Civil War, it wasn't that the South had less passion or determination. Their leaders were just as talented and strategic. The North won the war because of sheer numbers. On the Why the North Won the War table, write the following information. Population for the North, 71%, to the South, 26%. Bank deposits for the North, 81%, for the South, 19%. Factories, 85% for the North, 15% for the South. Railroad track, 72% for the North, 28% for the South. Just like our class simulation, the North had advantages in population and materials. What strategies did you use that helped you be more successful? Did you fold the paper, trace the stencil once, but you cut out several shapes at the same time? Did you make an assembly line so that people were doing the same job based on their skills? Did you make sure you had the most people cutting because that took the most time? What insights do you have about the advantages and challenges of simulations in the classroom? Did you understand the imbalance in population and materials because you experienced it? Was the activity engaging and fun because of the hands-on nature? Is this something you will remember doing over time? Did the activity give you a compelling why for remembering the information discussed after the activity? Please locate page 167, Classroom Connections. What topics in your curriculum would be a good fit for a culminating activity that is a simulation? If your students study money denominations and making change, do they simulate buying things in a school store and exchange money? Have you done a simulated jury when reading novels? Have you simulated the pioneers traveling west in a covered wagon by taping an area on the floor that is the same dimensions as a covered wagon? Do you have students stand in the area and do various tasks? How did this activity demonstrate multiple pathways to learning? Engagement. Were you able to choose roles within your teams? Action. Were you doing hands-on tasks when tracing, cutting, sorting, and counting? Expression. Were you able to develop your own strategy and method of production? Please take a moment to review the activity assets for this activity. Sometimes, educators, especially in the upper grades, are hesitant to do such interactive activities. They are concerned that students will get out of control. Those of us who teach these PLS classes know the opposite is true. We have found that students are engaged, on task, and interested just as you were when you were doing the activity. The activity is memorable, and so is the information they work with during the activity. It is important to set expectations and social guidelines when doing activities, but once you do, the activities work like a charm. I would like to share a story with you. One time, I had a course participant, a high school teacher who taught American history. She was skeptical about using simulations with her sophomores. She said her students would never get involved in something like the Civil War simulation. She was sure they would refuse to cooperate or participate, and that some students might even be disruptive. I told her I thought they would not only get involved, but would really enjoy the process. She asked me to come to her class and prove it, and I accepted the challenge when her class studied the Civil War. Before class, I hung the Mason-Dixon line down the center of her room and arranged the desks for the North and South. All the materials were ready, and we waited for the arrival of her students. The teacher warned me that she had a few characters in this class who could cause problems. One of the first students to arrive was one of her characters, accompanied by several of his buddies. He proceeded to do the limbo under the Mason-Dixon line and plopped down in one of the front row seats on the side of the South. When all the students had arrived and we had enthusiastically discussed all the things necessary to win a war, I told them about the contest. I never saw so many eager faces ready to get going. The most eager may have been the limbo star. I made him the leader for the South, and he organized his group during the strategy session. Almost immediately, he evolved from a negative influential to a positive South general. The work and competition was spirited as the students spent time cutting out all the items needed for the war. When time was up, the North had inevitably won. I showed the class the chart of the differences in population, bank holdings, factories, and miles of railroad track between the North and the South. We discussed the Northern naval blockade and how, as a result, the South couldn't get what it needed from factories in England. The students understood then why the South needed to invade the North. The follow-up discussion was powerful and insightful. By the time I was done, they understood a great deal about what happened in the war. I asked the team that represented the South if they had tried hard to win. They thought they tried harder than the North. I asked if they had weak leaders. Again, they said no. I asked why they lost. They were able to explain that it was a numbers game. I looked at the session as an overwhelming success for the students, the teacher, and the simulation process. The teacher watched the activity closely and took copious notes so she could do it with her students next year. Remember, sometimes we don't realize that many students are only waiting for the right teaching strategy to captivate them. Sometimes we have to take a chance and get students involved so they can understand the curriculum and develop necessary skills. This concludes Section 4, Part 5, Civil War Simulation. Please continue to Module Section 4, Part 5, Positioning Activities, Culminating, Classroom and Reflection Connections.